boss slammed his hand on the desk, eyes blazing with authority. You think you can talk back to me in my office? You're fired, right here, right now. The young woman froze, her heart pounding. Her co-worker's eyes widened in shock, whispers barely audible over the pounding silence. She clutched her bag to her chest. I don't understand, she whispered, voice trembling. The boss leaned closer, a smug smile twisting his face. Don't act innocent. You've crossed the line and everyone is watching. Pack your things. Now. Her hands shook, papers slipping through her fingers, scattered across the polished floor. Phones clattered to the ground. Every eye in the room was fixed on her. The humiliation was unbearable. But she didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She straightened her back, looked him in the eyes and walked out, leaving the office frozen in disbelief, whispers buzzing and the boss smirking, thinking he had broken her. But the story wasn't over, not even close. Just days later, the same woman returned, not as the employee they knew, not as someone who could be intimidated, but as the new boss, calm, poised, and in full control. It was the storm they never saw coming. How did she pull off the ultimate revenge? The answer will shock you. Stay with me until the very end. This isn't just a story about rules or mistakes. It's about respect, responsibility, and how one single choice can ignite a storm no one saw coming. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. You won't want to miss how this story ends. The office was frozen. Phones stopped ringing mid-call, chairs creaked under frozen weight, and even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to vanish. All eyes were locked on her Maya standing stiffly in the center of the floor. Her boss, Mr. Collins, was smiling, not the polite, professional kind of smile. This was the cruel, self-satisfied smirk of a man enjoying someone else's pain. You heard me, he snapped, pacing deliberately so everyone could see her. You're done, fired, right here, right now, and everyone gets to watch. Her co-workers looked down, pretending to type, pretending not to hear. Some exchanged nervous glances, but no one dared step in. Fear had frozen them. Maya's hands shook slightly as she gathered her things. A folder of reports she had stayed late to finish slipped from her grip, spilling papers onto the floor. The sound of them fluttering across the carpet was like a drumbeat of humiliation. Look at this mess, Collins barked, picking up a sheet and tossing it back down. Errors, missed deadlines, careless work. Do you even care about this company? Or are you just wasting everyone's time? Her throat tightened. Anger surged, but she forced herself to remain calm. She could feel every eye in the office on her, watching her humiliation, savoring it. Yet beneath that calm, a quiet fire began to burn. Every word he said, every sneer, only fueled her determination. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply straightened her shoulders, picked up her folder, and began to walk toward the elevator. Collins noticed the resolve in her eyes, and his smirk faltered for just a fraction of a second. You think you can just walk out like this? He sneered. Do you even realize what you're leaving behind? Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes, the calm before the storm. The elevator doors closed, swallowing her figure, leaving the office in stunned silence. Everyone exhaled slowly like they had just survived a tense storm, and somewhere in the back of their minds, a single thought lingered. This isn't over. The elevator doors closed, and the office returned to a stunned, uneasy silence. Collins leaned back against his desk, smirking, thinking he had won. He had humiliated her. He had reminded everyone of his authority. But no one noticed the shadow of doubt creeping into his mind, a fleeting, uncomfortable thought he quickly shook off. Outside the office, Maya walked through the city streets. But she didn't look defeated. Every step she took was measured, deliberate. People passed her, oblivious to the storm brewing inside her mind. She found a quiet cafe, far from the prying eyes of the corporate world. Sitting down, she opened her laptop and stared at the screen, a slow, deliberate plan forming in her mind. She remembered every slight, Every word Collins had thrown at her, every sneer, every humiliation. But she didn't let anger consume her. She turned it into fuel. Every insult became a brick in the foundation of her comeback. Her first move was subtle. She reached out to industry contacts, quietly connecting with people who mattered, people Collins had ignored or underestimated. Every phone call, every email was a carefully calculated step. Back in the office, Collins held a meeting, bragging about his victory. Employees nodded politely, but there was a tension in the air that even he couldn't ignore. Whispers traveled faster than words. "Did you see how she walked out? She didn't even cry. She looked like she was plotting something." Collins laughed it off, but the seed of unease had been planted. Meanwhile, Maya's plan was taking shape. She wasn't rushing. Every step was calculated. Every contact she made, every opportunity she explored, was designed to maximize her leverage. She had learned long ago that revenge isn't about anger. It's about timing, precision, and power. Days passed. Collins grew comfortable again, believing the story was over. He didn't notice the messages arriving in his inbox. The invitations, the meeting requests, the subtle shifts in the corporate world that were slowly positioning Maya where she needed to be. And then, just when he thought he was untouchable, there was a knock at his office door. He looked up, smirking. "Come in," he called. The door opened, and standing there, calm, confident, and commanding, was Maya. But not as an employee. She walked past him, her heels clicking on the floor like the ticking of a clock, counting down to his downfall. Every eye in the office followed her. Collins tried to hide his shock, but it was already too late. The whispers started immediately. "Is that? No, it can't be. She's the new boss?" Maya stopped, turned slightly and smiled. Not a friendly smile. A smile that said, "You underestimated me. Big mistake." Collins's smirk vanished. He realized too late that the person he humiliated days ago had returned not to beg, not to plead, but to claim power. The office was silent again. This time, not out of fear of humiliation, but out of awe. Everyone was waiting, wondering what would happen next. And Maya? She was savoring it. Every second of tension, every ounce of suspense was hers. Because the story wasn't over, it had only just begun. Maya didn't rush. She didn't storm in and announce herself. Every step was precise, calculated, designed to unsettle. The office felt different the moment she returned, the air heavier, charged with anticipation. Employees who had once watched her humiliation now watched her with wide-eyed curiosity and silent admiration. Collins sat at his desk, trying to maintain composure, but his hands twitched. The smirk that had once been effortless now felt forced, brittle. Maya walked past his office, every heel click echoing through the floor like a countdown to his reckoning. He tried to appear busy, pretending he didn't notice her, but the truth was obvious to everyone. He was shaken. Maya's first move was subtle. She didn't announce her authority immediately. Instead, she began attending meetings not as a participant, but as a force to be acknowledged. When she spoke, people listened. Her words were calm, measured, but carried undeniable weight. Every suggestion she made was accurate, insightful, and impossible to ignore. Collins tried to intervene, dismissing her ideas. "Let's stick to the plan we already have," he said, attempting to assert dominance. But the employees who once cowered under his glare started nodding at Maya's points. They leaned forward, engaged, silently signaling that her influence was growing. Every nod was a small defeat for him, every glance in her direction a reminder that she was no longer powerless. And then came the whisper, subtle, cautious, but spreading like wildfire. "She's amazing. She knows exactly what she's doing. Is he afraid of her?" Collins tried to shake it off, but the tension in the room was palpable. The walls he had built with fear were cracking, and Maya watched patiently as the cracks widened. One afternoon, during a high-stakes strategy meeting, Maya did something Collins didn't see coming. She presented data, precise, undeniable evidence that an ongoing project was failing, and that his strategy was costing the company thousands. The room went silent as she walked through the numbers, step by step, exposing flaws that no one had dared point out. Collins felt the sting immediately. His face went pale. Every claim she made was accurate, every criticism irrefutable. And the employees? They began murmuring agreement, nodding subtly, their loyalty shifting before his very eyes. Maya didn't gloat. She didn't mock. She simply stood there, calm, composed, commanding. Her quiet confidence was louder than any yell he could make. Collins slammed his pen on the table, trying to reclaim control. This is unacceptable. How did no one see this before? The room remained silent. No one answered, and in that silence, Collins realized the full scope of what had happened. His authority, once absolute, was crumbling. Every look, every whisper, every nod was a reminder. The woman he had publicly humiliated days ago was now in control. Maya smiled ever so slightly, just enough to let him know she was aware of the power she now held. And Collins finally could no longer hide it. Fear. The tension in the room didn't fade. In fact, it thickened with every second. Everyone knew a reckoning was coming. And Collins knew it too. Because Maya wasn't just back. She was taking everything with her. Days passed, but the office never returned to its old rhythm. Every glance, every whisper, every quiet movement carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Collins could feel it, like a storm rolling in, slow but unstoppable. He tried to maintain control, but Maya's presence was a constant reminder that he had underestimated her. Finally, it happened. A one-on-one meeting. Collins called her into his office, trying to project authority, trying to convince himself he could reclaim the upper hand. Maya entered without hesitation. She didn't apologize. She didn't bow. She simply walked in, closed the door, and fixed him with a steady, unflinching gaze. Collins leaned back in his chair, attempting to smirk. "I suppose you're here to grovel," he said, voice forced with bravado. Maya's eyes didn't flicker. "I'm here to talk business," she said calmly, "and to remind you that this company thrives on competence, not intimidation." He scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "You were fired, remember that? Don't act like you belong here." Her smile was slight, but it cut sharper than any words he could muster. "I belong here because I earned it, not because of fear, not because you wanted to make a spectacle of me, because I know how to run this company better than you ever have." The room went silent, even though no one else was present. It was a tension so thick it could be felt physically. Collins could feel it pressing against his chest, making his smirk falter. "You think this changes anything?" he asked, trying to regain control. "You think one meeting, one clever strategy session, makes you superior?" Maya leaned forward slightly, her calm intensity magnifying with every word. "I don't think, Mr. Collins, I know. You humiliated me publicly, made me the subject of your petty power play. But look around. The employees aren't afraid of me, they respect me. And that respect, that's real power, something you've never understood." Collins' hands tightened into fists on the desk. He had tried to intimidate her, belittle her, make her vanish from memory. But every tactic had failed, and now she stood here, unshaken, in control, every word a hammer striking at the foundation of his ego. Maya didn't stop. She outlined her vision, step by step, showing him the gaps in his strategy, the financial losses, the inefficiencies he had ignored. Every detail she presented left him exposed, vulnerable, shrinking in the very chair he once occupied as a king. By the time she finished, Collins was pale. His voice, once booming, was barely audible. I didn't see this coming." She smiled just slightly, letting him know the full weight of the reversal. "And you won't see the next steps coming either, because this time, I'm in charge." For the first time, Collins understood the depth of his mistake. The humiliation he had imposed on her had only fueled her rise. The fear he had used to control everyone had vanished. And the woman he had tried to crush, she was now the storm he couldn't withstand. Maya turned to leave, the faint echo of her heels marking each second. each heartbeat of suspense in the room. Collins sat frozen, knowing the game had changed. Forever. The tension didn't dissipate. It lingered, thick, heavy, almost tangible, a silent promise that this was only the beginning. The office had transformed. Whispers of Maya's influence spread faster than wildfire. Employees who once trembled under Collins' gaze now glanced at him with quiet defiance, inspired by her composure and command. Every interaction he tried to assert dominance and only highlighted how much control he had lost. Maya didn't rush. She let her presence speak. Meetings started with her insight, strategic plans she refined, and suggestions that were impossible to ignore. Every success she led, every decision she made, chipped away at Collins' fragile authority. One afternoon, the board convened for a critical session. Collins entered the room, confident as always, or at least pretending to be. Maya was already there, seated confidently at the head of the table, her notes meticulously arranged, her demeanor unshakable. The meeting began. Collins tried to dominate, but every move he made was anticipated, countered, and reframed by Maya. Employees exchanged glances, nodding toward her ideas while Collins' suggestions faltered under scrutiny. By the time she finished presenting, the board was silent. The evidence was undeniable. Maya's vision was sharper, her strategies more efficient, her leadership more compelling. Collins realized with a cold panic that the tide had turned. "I see," he stammered, his usual confidence gone. "You clearly." Maya's voice cut through the tension. Calm, measured, final. "I've done what you couldn't. I've led this company where it needed to go, and it's time someone capable runs it. That someone is me." A murmur of approval spread through the boardroom. Collins' face drained of color. The employees, watching through glass partitions, felt a mix of awe and vindication. He had underestimated her, humiliated her, and now the consequences were unavoidable. By the end of the meeting, the board had made their decision unanimous. Maya was appointed as the new CEO. Collins, the man who had publicly fired her, would report to her. The room fell silent as Maya stood. She looked around, her gaze sweeping over the faces that had once witnessed her humiliation, now standing in quiet support. She smiled faintly, not cruelly, but with quiet triumph. Collins tried to protest, to argue, to reclaim even a shred of his former power. But no one listened. His authority had evaporated. Every whispered doubt, every questioning glance, every silent nod toward Maya had cemented the new reality. He was no longer in control. Maya walked past him, each step deliberate, echoing like the sound of a gavel. Every employee who had watched her rise felt the weight of justice served. Not through rage, but through precision, patience, and undeniable competence. The tension didn't dissipate. It hung in the air like electricity, a reminder of the reversal, the reckoning, and the unstoppable force she had become. Collins sat in his chair, stunned, powerless, and aware that everything had changed in mere days. He had ruled through fear. She had risen through strategy, intelligence, and resilience. And in the quiet aftermath, the lesson was clear for everyone in the office. Never underestimate someone you try to break. Maya's eyes met his one last time, calm, unflinching. And in that gaze, Collins understood fully. He had lost not just his authority, but the respect of everyone he had tried to control. She had returned, she had won, and the story, for everyone who had witnessed it, would be remembered for years to come. The office had been transformed, the balance of power had shifted, and Maya, she had taken everything, quietly, relentlessly, and flawlessly. The suspense, the tension, the drama it had all built to this moment. And the victory was hers. The office never felt the same again. The hum of daily work was still there, but it carried a new weight, a mix of respect, fear, and admiration. Maya's presence dominated every corner of the building. Where she walked, employees straightened their posture, not out of fear, but because they recognized the force of competence and authority she brought with her. Collins lingered in the shadows of his former power, watching every interaction, every nod of approval given to Maya. He realized painfully that his previous methods, intimidation, humiliation, fear, had been shallow tools. They could not withstand strategy, intelligence, and unwavering patience. Maya didn't flaunt her victory. She didn't need to. Every decision she made, every email she sent, every instruction she gave was a quiet but undeniable statement. The company had a new leader, and that leader was unshakable. In meetings, employees now spoke up without hesitation. Ideas flowed freely, mistakes were discussed openly, and solutions were implemented with efficiency Collins had never seen under his regime. He tried to interrupt, to assert himself, but the room no longer turned to him automatically. The dynamic had shifted. Every attempt to regain control only highlighted his diminishing influence. Collins's internal struggle was relentless. He replayed every moment of Maya's firing, every smirk, every word of defiance, and realized that each had been a spark, igniting a fire he could never extinguish. He had underestimated her. He had humiliated the wrong person. And now the consequences were unavoidable. Meanwhile, Maya worked tirelessly, not out of revenge, but because she knew that leadership required vision, not vengeance. She implemented changes, streamlined processes, and rebuilt morale. Each small victory strengthened her authority. Each successful initiative was another brick in the empire she was quietly creating. Employees whispered about the transformation. Those who had doubted her now became her strongest allies. They shared stories of how she had faced public humiliation, yet returned stronger, more focused, and relentless. The suspense in the office had shifted from fear of Collins to anticipation of what Maya would achieve next. And Collins? He sat behind his desk, quietly observing, realizing that the woman he had tried to crush had become the center of gravity in the company. Every day he came to work, he faced the undeniable truth. The balance of power had shifted irreversibly. Maya's eyes, calm and unwavering, swept over the office. She didn't need to issue commands loudly. Her presence alone compelled respect. Her strategy ensured results. And her confidence made even the most skeptical employees follow her lead. The tension lingered, unbroken, but now it carried a new weight, one of inevitability. The company had a new leader, and the man who had thought himself untouchable was now a spectator, watching his own downfall unfold quietly, internally, without anyone daring to voice it. Every second in that office was a reminder. Underestimating someone with focus, intelligence, and patience can lead to consequences that no amount of power or intimidation can reverse. Maya had not only returned, she had claimed everything. The suspense, the tension, the drama, it hadn't ended. It had only shifted, now carrying the silent but undeniable promise of complete and total mastery over a world that once tried to humiliate her. Weeks had passed since Maya officially took control of the company. The employees who had once whispered in fear now whispered in awe. Collins, once the untouchable authority, had become a shadow in his own office. Every glance from Maya reminded him of the power he had lost. It all came to a head during a high-profile board meeting. Investors, executives, and key decision-makers filled the room, waiting for a report on the company's performance. Collins walked in first, chest puffed with his usual forced confidence, attempting to reassert dominance. But the moment Maya entered, all eyes shifted. The room felt charged, electric. Maya didn't need to speak loudly. Her presence alone commanded attention. She moved gracefully to the head of the table, laid down her meticulously prepared reports, and began presenting. Every number, every chart, every plan she unveiled demonstrated her mastery. She was precise, visionary, and unstoppable. Collins tried to interject, trying to remind everyone of his former authority. I think we need to... The room cut him off with polite nods toward Maya, the unspoken message clear. Her word carried weight now, not his. Each point she made exposed the flaws in his previous strategies, the inefficiencies he had ignored, and the opportunities he had missed. By the end of the presentation, the board was unanimous. Maya's leadership wasn't just effective, it was transformative. Collins's attempts to salvage control only highlighted his irrelevance. Maya looked directly at him, calm, steady. Her eyes carried the weight of days of preparation, patience, and resilience. "This company is moving forward," she said quietly, but every word resonated like a hammer strike. "And it moves with competence, clarity, and respect. Qualities you failed to provide." Collins's face fell. The smirk that had once been his shield crumbled completely. Every whisper of doubt, every side-eye from the staff, every subtle acknowledgement of Maya's authority reminded him that he had lost not just the company, but the respect of everyone in it. Silence fell. Not the tense silence of fear, but the charged silence of inevitability. The room had witnessed a complete reversal. The humiliated had become the triumphant, the oppressor reduced to powerless. Finally, Maya stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't gloat. But she walked past Collins, heels clicking on the polished floor like a metronome, counting out his defeat. Employees watched every step, sensing the finality of the moment. Collins sank into his chair, defeated, knowing that the balance of power had shifted permanently. His authority, once absolute, was gone. The woman he had tried to humiliate had returned to claim not just respect, but mastery. The tension in the room remained, but now it was a tension of awe and inevitability. Maya's triumph was complete, and the office, the company, and everyone who had witnessed her rise understood the lesson. Never underestimate the quiet strength of someone you attempt to break. And as Maya's calm gaze swept over the room, everyone knew one truth: the story had ended. But the impression, the suspense, the drama, the sheer weight of her victory would linger forever. Maya had returned. She had won, and nothing would ever be the same again. The office was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that followed chaos. It was the kind that comes after a storm has passed, heavy, charged, and full of unspoken realizations. Every employee felt it. Every glance at Maya, every subtle nod toward her, confirmed a new reality. The woman who had been humiliated in front of everyone was now the one in control. Collins sat at his desk, slumped, staring at the floor. He replayed every cruel word, every public humiliation he had inflicted. He had thought he could break her. He had thought he was untouchable. But Maya had turned his game against him, silently, meticulously, and finally, irrevocably. The employees who had once feared him now glanced at him with something between pity and astonishment. Their loyalty had shifted quietly, imperceptibly at first, but undeniably now. The whispers spread. She never faltered. She came back stronger than anyone could imagine. "Look at how she handled him. It's brilliant." Maya didn't need to speak to enforce her authority. Every action she took, every step she walked, every decision she made broadcast her power louder than any words. She handled meetings with precision, delegated tasks with clarity, and rewarded excellence with fairness. Employees responded not out of fear, but respect, the most lasting, unshakable kind of loyalty. Collins, once feared and revered, was now relegated to the sidelines. Every attempt to assert influence only reminded everyone of how powerless he had become. He realized bitterly that his downfall had been swift because he had never truly understood what it meant to lead with competence, not intimidation. Meanwhile, Maya continued to consolidate her position. She checked in on teams personally, encouraged innovation, and quietly guided the company toward goals that no one had dared to aim for before. Her presence became magnetic, her leadership unmistakable, her influence undeniable. The office had transformed into a place of respect, efficiency, and subtle suspense. Employees didn't just work. They thrived, inspired by someone who had faced humiliation, refused to bend, and returned with unshakable authority. And for Collins, every glance at her, every subtle acknowledgement of her dominance, was a reminder that the balance of power had shifted forever. The woman he had humiliated was now the heartbeat of the company. Maya's victory wasn't just about authority, it was about proving, quietly and decisively, that resilience, intelligence, and patience could overturn even the most humiliating injustices. The suspense, the tension, and the drama of the office had not ended. It had evolved. Every day, every decision carried the echo of her triumph. And in that charged atmosphere, one thing was certain. Maya was unstoppable, and the lesson of her rise would linger far beyond the walls of the office. The office had changed completely. What was once a place of fear and whispered compliance had become a space buzzing with quiet confidence, efficiency, and respect. Maya moved through it with calm authority, every step deliberate, every glance commanding attention. Colin sat at his desk, an empty chair of his former authority. He no longer commanded fear, and he no longer held the respect that had once defined him. Every move he tried to make to reclaim control was subtle, cautious, a stark contrast to his old brazen arrogance. Maya paused in the hallway, looking over her team. Employees stopped their work, subtly straightened, and watched her pass. Not out of fear, but because they admired her resilience, her intelligence, and the quiet decisiveness she radiated. She didn't need to announce her power. It was evident in every action, every decision, every carefully executed initiative. Collins watched from the corner of his office, finally understanding the full weight of his miscalculation. He had humiliated her, tried to destroy her, yet it had been the fuel for her rise. Every whisper, every glance, every nod from the employees reminded him of the depth of his own failure. The tension in the office had transformed. It was no longer fear, it was suspenseful respect. Everyone knew she had endured, planned, and conquered. Maya approached Collins's office for the first time since taking control. He looked up, pale, uncertain, aware that she was about to pass judgment not with words, but with presence. She walked past him, slowly, heels clicking on the polished floor like the heartbeat of inevitability. Employees watched silently, fully aware that the woman they had seen humiliated days ago was now untouchable. Every step she took was a quiet assertion of mastery, every gaze a reminder that power could be reclaimed and wielded with precision. Maya paused at the front of the office, turning to face the staff. Her voice, calm and measured, carried through the floor. This company thrives on talent, dedication, and integrity. Let us never forget that success comes not from intimidation, but from resilience, intelligence, and courage. The room exhaled collectively. A murmur of approval, almost reverent, spread through the employees. Collins's presence, once dominant, was now reduced to a cautionary tale, a reminder that cruelty and arrogance could never outlast strategy, patience, and determination. As Maya returned to her office, the suspense lingered in the air. Not the suspense of uncertainty, but the quiet tension of someone unstoppable. She had faced humiliation, overcome it, and risen stronger than anyone could have anticipated. The ultimate triumph was complete. Maya had not only reclaimed her dignity, she had rewritten the rules of power in that office. Her story was no longer about revenge. It was about resilience, intelligence, and undeniable mastery. The office had witnessed a transformation. Collins had witnessed it, and the employees, once bystanders to injustice, now became witnesses to triumph, the kind that inspires, resonates, and leaves no doubt. Maya's victory was quiet, strategic, and absolute. She had turned humiliation into power, fear into respect, and suspense into a lesson no one in that office would ever forget. And as the sun streamed through the glass walls, the office breathed a new air charged with energy, anticipation, and the unshakable presence of a woman who had risen, unstoppable, from the ashes of public humiliation to the pinnacle of authority.